public is being conditioned to watch for missiles. This is a strategic misdirection. The kinetic cost of a conventional strike is a liability for a state experiencing a solvency crisis. The true vector of attack is not noise, it is engineered silence. The blueprint is already public. Ukraine's deployment of low-cost drones against Russian border regions is not a tactical innovation. It is a systemic proof of concept. It demonstrates a state's ability to inflict strategic pain with minimal investment. For a regime like Iran, whose politics and economy are in a state of collapse, this is not an option. It is the only option left. The target is not a carrier group. The target is the central nervous system of global finance and military command and control. Cutting transoceanic cables or blinding critical satellites is not an act of war. It is a catalyst. It is designed to create a single outcome: the blind Leviathan. A blinded superpower cannot verify a threat's origin or intent. Its protocols revert to launch on warning. It is forced into a disproportionate kinetic response to a non-kinetic attack. This is not a guess. It is doctrine. When Israeli leadership states, "all bets are off," this is the pre-scripted retaliation they are referencing. According to RUSI analyses, this creates a feedback loop. A low-cost provocation triggers a high-cost retaliation, making catastrophic escalation a mathematical certainty. The motive is not conquest. It is survival. We are witnessing a global solvency crisis, but the asset being depleted is not currency. It is state capacity. The pivot to asymmetry is not a strategic choice. It is the final act of a failing state. This is a launch-on-warning protocol against internal collapse. Consider the blueprint. According to reports from sources like the Chosun Ilbo, Iran's internal political structure is systematically collapsing its own security and economy. This is the definition of asymmetric decay. The state is insolvent, unable to fund conventional military options or maintain domestic stability. It is a liability to itself. This dynamic forces a pivot. According to CSIS analysis, a protracted conventional war becomes a severe domestic liability, draining political capital and economic liquidity. The kinetic cost of traditional warfare exceeds the regime's solvency. Weakness, therefore, mandates a strategic shift from expensive, symmetric conflict to low-cost, high-leverage asymmetric provocations. The objective of these provocations, such as the drone strikes noted in Russian border regions, is not to win a battle. It is to trigger a pre-scripted, disproportionate retaliation from a superior power. The decaying state needs its adversary to declare, as Netanyahu warned, that all bets are off. This act of strategic arson is designed to shatter the status quo of a slow death and reset the entire geopolitical board in a wave of chaos. The central mechanism of asymmetric decay is not political ideology. It is the economics of lethality. The Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, has modeled the kinetic cost-exchange ratio. The data is irrefutable. A state actor invests $5 million in a main battle tank, a platform requiring years of training, complex logistics, and a massive industrial base. The counter-asset is a $500 drone, often assembled in a workshop, not a factory. This is not a one-to-one threat. It is a 10,000-to-1 imbalance in capital outlay. A collapsing state like Iran, facing a national solvency crisis, cannot afford a symmetric military. It is strategically and economically bankrupt in conventional terms, but it can afford thousands of these asymmetric liabilities. This is the democratization of violence. Lethality is no longer the exclusive domain of solvent superpowers. It has been decentralized. We see the blueprint in action as drone strikes hit Russian territory. For a state facing internal collapse, these low-cost provocations are not acts of desperation. They are rational, economic investments designed to trigger a disproportionate kinetic response from an adversary. The objective is to force the overextended power, the US or Israel, into a launch-on-warning protocol, a pre-scripted retaliation where, as Israeli officials state, all bets are off. The collapsing state leverages its opponent's superior force as the primary accelerant for a wider, systemic crisis. The math is simple. They trade a $500 drone for a multi-billion-dollar escalation. It's the most leveraged trade in geopolitical history. Theaters of conflict are no longer defined by national borders. They are defined by systemic weakness. These are the gray zones, regions exhibiting state fragility, which become proxy laboratories for asymmetric warfare. Analysts at RUSI note that these zones are intentionally selected not for their intrinsic value, but for their utility as low-cost staging grounds. A kinetic event in Venezuela is not about Venezuela. As reports from Reuters confirm, it's a strategic signal to Beijing. A drone launched from a failed state is a calculated input, designed to test the response protocols of an overextended global power. The vector for this new accelerant is asymmetric decay. A state like Iran, facing a terminal solvency crisis fueled by what the Chosun Ilbo calls religion-captured politics, loses the capacity for rational, conventional action. It cannot win a symmetric war. It can, however, leverage the low kinetic cost of asymmetric weapons, a blueprint validated in the fields of Ukraine as documented by the Times of India. These weapons are then deployed through proxies in the gray zones. This is not a guess. It's a blueprint. Warnings from governments like Canada or South Africa about their own internal instability are merely signals of new potential laboratories coming online. Provocation is a key designed for a specific lock. The intended outcome is not tactical victory, but to trigger a disproportionate, pre-scripted retaliation. When an official like Netanyahu warns that all bets are off, this is not a threat. It is the confirmation of a successful trigger. The collapsing state forces its adversary into a launch-on-warning posture, creating a feedback loop where escalation is no longer a political choice, but a mathematical certainty. The gray zone is simply the detached, deniable platform where the first domino is pushed. This is how a systemic conflict begins, not with a bang, but with a calculated low-cost provocation from a bankrupt actor. The launch-on-warning doctrine is a relic of the Cold War, a protocol of mutually assured destruction. The logic is brutal. If early warning systems detect an incoming nuclear strike, you launch your own missiles before the enemy's warheads arrive. You do not wait for confirmation. The decision window is not hours, it is minutes. The system is designed for a symmetric threat with a clear return address. Now introduce the accelerant, a cyber attack. It is the perfect asymmetric weapon, possessing near zero kinetic cost and maximum plausible deniability. It does not need to destroy the early warning radar. It only needs to blind it. This creates the fog of digital war, a solvency crisis of information for the command authority. When the screen goes black, the doctrine's internal logic collapses. The commander is forced into a zero-sum calculation. Is this a system malfunction or a decapitation strike in progress? Waiting for verification risks total annihilation. Launching guarantees global escalation. The protocol itself, faced with ambiguity it was never designed for, forces a launch out of fear. This is the leverage a collapsing state like Iran seeks. As analysts at RUSI note, the blueprint for such an attack already exists in conventional warfare, with low-cost drones being deployed in Russian border regions. For an internally collapsing state, a cyber offensive is the next logical step. The objective is not to win, but to provoke the pre-scripted, disproportionate retaliation an overextended adversary has already promised. The all bets are off scenario. The feedback loop becomes a mathematical certainty. The terminal phase of a nation-state is not implosion, but a kinetic, outward lashing. Analysis confirms Iran's political and economic structures are collapsing. Source: Jose Onilbo, forcing its leadership into a solvency crisis. Rational statecraft is no longer a viable instrument. The regime is now a cornered liability, forced to generate leverage through asymmetric means. The blueprint is public domain. The low kinetic cost of drone technology, proven effective in border regions, source, Times of India, provides a deniable and affordable weapons system. The target system, simultaneously, has pre-programmed its own escalatory response. Israeli leadership has already broadcast its all bets are off protocol, source, AOL.com, creating a launch-on-warning environment. This is not a deterrent. It is a mathematical trigger. The feedback loop requires a catalyst, a calibration shot to test the system's reaction time without immediate attribution. CSIS risk models show a direct military strike is inefficient. The optimal vector is an attack on critical economic infrastructure, designed to appear as catastrophic system failure. Within the next 12 months, anticipate a coordinated, multi-day blackout of a Tier 1 Israeli seaport or a national data backbone. The event will be a hybrid cyber-physical attack, executed by proxy, rendering attribution technically impossible, but politically obvious. It is designed solely to trigger the pre-scripted, disproportionate retaliation.